Hello all. Today we are going to see about brucellosis and leptospirosis. Brucellosis and leptospirosis are two major bloodstream infections occurring in humans. Bloodstream infections are one of the most fatal form of infectious disease occurring in human as it can affect every part of our body. Brucellosis caused by Brucella and leptospirosis caused by Leptospira. So bloodstream infections can occur either as bacteremia, where bacteria is present in the blood without multiplication, or it can occur as a more severe form which is called as septicemia, where bacteria are present in the blood with active multiplication and release of endotoxins. And these bloodstream infections again are classified either into primary bloodstream infections or secondary bloodstream infections. Primary bloodstream infection are those where the predominant site of infection is the bloodstream. Whereas in case of secondary bloodstream infection, the primary foci is somewhere else in the body, like in the internal organ, and the organisms present in the internal organ are then released into the bloodstream, causing secondary bloodstream infection. And Brucella and Leptospira are the important causative agents of primary bloodstream infections. Other organisms which causes primary bloodstream infections are typhoidal salmonella, has a group of organisms, viridans streptococci, and rickettsial group. And today we'll be covering only about Brucella and Leptospira. Brucella are gram-negative coccobacillary organisms which are obligate aerobes and responsible for the disease brucellosis. Brucellosis is primarily a zoonotic infection and the disease is transmitted from the infected animals to the humans. There are four main species of brucellosis, which is Brucella melitensis, Brucella abartus, Brucella suis, and Brucella canis. And among these, melitensis is the most commonest organism which is responsible for human infection, and it is the most pathogenic species also. Brucella melitensis usually affects goats, sheep, and camels, whereas abartus usually causes infection in cattle. And suis, as the name indicates, it usually affects pigs, and canis is responsible for infection in dogs. And these infected animals shed the organism in all their secretion, and whenever humans come in contact with these infected secretions or infected animal products, they acquire the infection. Coming to the pathogenesis, the predominant source of infection for brucellosis, as we all know, since it is a zoonotic infection, the infected animals and the animal products are the major source of infection. And once the person comes in contact with the infected animal, it can spread to humans by any one of the following routes. It can occur either by direct contact with the abraded skin and the mucous membrane. When the skin or the mucous membrane comes in contact with the infected animal tissues or animal secretions, the organisms enter inside the human body. Or it can occur by ingestion of improperly cooked meat or unpasteurized milk and dairy products. In some cases, it can even occur by inhalation of aerosols containing the infective material. Once the organism has entered inside the human body by any of the above said routes, these organisms enter the bloodstream and they are predominantly intracellular pathogens, so they are taken up by the macrophage monocyte system. And they multiply exclusively in the lymphatic and the reticuloendothelial system, which is constituted by liver, spleen, lymph nodes, and bone marrow. And after multiplying in the reticuloendothelial system, they are again released into the bloodstream, causing bacteremia, which results in the clinical manifestation of the disease. Because these are predominantly intracellular pathogens, the T-cell immunity plays a main role in controlling the infection. And antibodies are also formed following the infection. You can see both IgM and IgG antibodies developing in the person's system. So the various clinical manifestations which can occur are: 1. It can occur either as an asymptomatic or a latent infection where the affected individual do not have any clinical manifestation, but there is serological changes occurring inside the body. Or it can have either acute or a subacute manifestation, or it can manifest either as a chronic brucellosis. So acute onset disease is usually seen in 50% of the cases. The classical clinical manifestation consists of triad of fever with profuse sweating, arthralgia or arthritis, and hepatosplenomegaly. And typically it resembles a typhoid-like illness, but it differs from typhoid in being less severe and less acute. And the pattern of fever is also very typical in case of brucellosis, where you have an undulating pattern, which is also called as a waving pattern, which means in between the fever spike, you have afebrile periods, which produces a wavery pattern, which is called as undulating fever, which is very typical for brucellosis. And therefore, brucellosis is also called as undulant fever. And unlike typhoid, here you have musculoskeletal involvement. Apart from the classical manifestation, some person can also end up with complications affecting almost all the systems of the body, the gastrointestinal tract, musculoskeletal system, central nervous system, CVS, and genitourinary system. So how do you make a laboratory diagnosis of brucellosis? All lab diagnosis starts with a good sample collection. So the various specimens which can be collected for diagnosis of brucellosis are blood, bone marrow, and based on the other systems involved, you can also collect CSF when the central nervous system is involved, or any other sterile body fluids based on the site of involvement, tissues. All these can be subjected for culture, and serum sample can be collected for doing serological test for detection of antibodies. And whenever blood sample is collected, please remember, sample has to be collected always before administration of antibiotic to get a good isolation rate. Sample has to be collected aseptically, and at least 8 to 10 ml of blood has to be collected for one bottle. So this is very, very important, because only when this volume of blood has been collected from the patient, we can expect a good isolation rate. This is not only in case of brucellosis. For any disease, whenever blood culture is being requested, you have to send at least minimum 2 bottles of blood for each patient. And each bottle should have at least 8 to 10 ml of blood collected from the patient to have a very good isolation rate around 98%. And always remember to collect blood before administration of antibiotics. And if the patient is already on antibiotic, try to collect the blood before administering the next dose of antibiotic to increase or to have a better isolation of the organism. And bone marrow always yields a better isolation rate when compared to blood, because bone marrow gives from the bone marrow we are able to isolate the organism even when the sample has been collected after the start of antibiotics. Blood culture can be done either by manual methods or by automated cultures. Automated cultures are always better over the manual cultures because the turnaround time is very less, and the isolation rate is also very good when compared to the manual methods. And in case of brucellosis, automated cultures will give a result over a period of 7 to 10 days. Whereas manual method is done by using a technique called Castaneda's method, which uses Castaneda's biphasic media, where the single bottle has both solid as well as liquid medium. So here we use BHI broth and BHI agar. Once the sample has been collected, it's inoculated into the broth phase of the medium. It is incubated, and then you take the bottle, tilt the broth so that the broth flows over the agar, which acts as a method of subculture. So this is biphasic media is more advantageous when compared to the broth culture because it avoids unnecessary opening of bottles for doing a subculture. So that is a major advantage of this Castaneda's method, mainly avoids contamination of the blood culture bottle. And the plates are the bottles has to be incubated for a period of 4 weeks. And in case of automated culture, once the bottle's flap senses the presence of microorganism, they are then subcultured onto the blood agar plates, and Brucella produces small, smooth, transparent, non-hemolytic colonies. So Brucella, they are obligate aerobic organisms, but the growth is enhanced when they are incubated in the presence of 5 to 10% of carbon dioxide. And they require enriched media. So media which contains serum or liver extracts always facilitates the growth of Brucella, but they need prolonged incubation for them to grow on the culture plates. And once growth has happened on the culture plate, you do a gram staining from the culture plate and confirm the organism to be a gram-negative Coccobacilli, and these are very small organisms and they are non-motile, non-capsulated and non-sporine organisms. And the growth is confirmed or identification is done by performing various biochemical reactions. And Brucella, they are both catalase and oxidase positive organisms. They give a positive urease test. They are MR and VP negative. And species differentiation can be done by performing various other biochemical reactions as well as by phage lysis test. As isolation of organism is very difficult and it also needs a prolonged incubation time, serological test plays a very important role in diagnosis of Brucella infection. And standard agglutination test, also called as SAT, is the gold standard serological test which is used for diagnosis of brucellosis. This is a typical tube agglutination test, and we try to deduct the antibodies in the patient's serum against antigens of Brucella abortus. So both IgM and IgG can be deducted in standard agglutination test. So it detects the total antibodies but do not differentiate whether it's IgM or IgG. And therefore, we cannot say whether the person is having an acute Brucella infection or a chronic Brucella infection. So how do you interpret this standard agglutination test? So all agglutination tests, we have to look for the titers. And in case of brucellosis, the significant titers which is to be considered for reporting as positive varies in endemic and non-endemic area. Suppose a person is coming from a non-endemic area, the titer of 160 or more in a person with a clinical manifestation is considered to be significant, and you can consider the patient to be positive for Brucella infection. Whereas when the patient is coming from an endemic area, you have to expect more higher titers because their baseline titers will be high, and therefore for persons from endemic area, a titer of 320 or more is considered to be positive, or you can try to demonstrate an increase in titers in paired sera where 2 serum samples are collected at an interval of 2 to 4 weeks, and you demonstrate an increase in antibody levels in between these 2 serum samples. Or in some cases, the decrease in antibody titer can also be considered as significant actually when a patient is entering into a convalescent phase from an infective phase. So SAT cannot differentiate an acute from a chronic brucellosis. So a modification which has been developed for this SAT to differentiate acute and chronic brucellosis is performing a 2-mercaptoethanol standard agglutination test. This 2-mercaptoethanol destroys IgM antibody. So when this 2-mercaptoethanol SAT test is performed and you get a positive SAT test with a negative test in 2-mercaptoethanol SAT, so it means the patient is suffering from acute brucellosis because IgM antibodies has been destroyed from the patient's serum. Whereas when you get a positive result in both SAT as well as 2-mercaptoethanol SAT, then the patient is suffering from chronic brucellosis because even after addition of 2-mercaptoethanol, IgM antibodies, if it is present in the chronic brucellosis, would have been destroyed, and the patient has got a positive result for IgG antibody. Or either the patient didn't have IgM antibody in the chronic phase, and so it was only the IgG antibody which gave a positive result in 2-mercaptoethanol SAT positive. So this 2-mercaptoethanol SAT is useful for differentiating between acute and a chronic Brucella infection. So apart from the culture test which tries to isolate the organism and the serological test where we demonstrate the antibodies against Brucella, Now, molecular diagnostic methods are available for diagnosis of all infective organisms. So, PCR is available again for diagnosis of Brucella infection, which again gives a very rapid results, and this is highly useful in culture negative cases with a strong suspicion for Brucella in a patient coming from an endemic area. And detection of animal infection is also very important from the control point of view. So animals have also to be screened for the presence of Brucella infection. This can be done by various methods like milk ring test or Rose Bengal card test, where these tests try to detect the Brucella infection in animals. And finally, coming to the treatment of brucellosis. So antimicrobials plays a very important role in treating the infection and preventing the complication. So the standard regimens which are used in adults are doxycycline plays a very important role in treatment of brucellosis. So in adult patient, you can start with gentamicin for 7 days with doxycycline, which has to be continued for 6 weeks. Alternatively, streptomycin can be used instead of gentamicin. And for persons with CNS complication, ceftriaxone has to be added to the regimen, and the treatment has to be prolonged for a period of 3 to 6 months. Alternatively, other drugs which can be tried are rifampicin, aminoglycosides, and cotrimoxazole. And prophylaxis is very important to prevent the spread of the disease, because this is zoonotic infection. You can easily prevent it once the infection is controlled in animals. So try to control the infection in animal, frequent screening of the animals and slaughtering of the infected animal, and pasteurization or boiling of the milk before it is consumed. And vaccination for animals has to be made mandatory, and all the necessary precautions if all these necessary precautions are taken, the disease can be prevented. Moving on to leptospirosis. Leptospirosis again is one of the important primary bloodstream infection occurring in humans. Leptospirosis caused by Leptospira, which belongs to spirochetes family. The 3 important genus among the spirochetes causing human infection are Treponema, Borrelia, and Leptospira. And these spirochetes, they are thin, elongated, flexible, spirally coiled, gram-negative bacilli, which are usually motile with the help of endoflagella. So here, the organisms differ from other motile organisms in that the flagella is not projecting outside the body, but it is present inside the body, in between the peptidoglycan layer and the outer membrane. And they exhibit various types of motility, like extension motility, corkscrew type of motility, or translatory type of motility. So these are the different genus of spirochetes. 3 important human pathogens being Treponema, Borrelia, and Leptospira. So this is the microscopic picture of Leptospira intragans, species called Leptospira intragans. It's called so because when you look into the picture, you can see a question mark shaped hooked end, and that is why they are called as Leptospira intragans. And this is after performing the silver staining, because they're very thin, delicate organisms. So you have to go for an impregnation staining to demonstrate them under the microscope, or you can view them under the dark ground microscopy. Leptospira are thin, spirally coiled gram-negative bacteria, and there are 2 important species of Leptospira. One is Leptospira intragans, which you showed in the picture, which you saw in the picture there, which is a pathogenic species for humans, and it has 26 serogroups and more than 300 serovars or serotypes. The other species is Leptospira biflexa, which is predominantly a saprophytic organism, which has 38 serogroups and 65 serovars. Again, like brucellosis, leptospirosis is also a zoonotic infection, which is predominantly transmitted from rodents. And the infected animals excrete the organism in the urine. So when the humans come in either direct or indirect contact with the infected animal secretion, especially the urine of the infected animal, human acquires the infection. So either by direct contact with abraded skin and mucous membrane with the contaminated urine or other secretion of the animal, or indirectly when the person comes in contact with the water which is contaminated with the urine of the infected animal. This typically occurs in persons working in field. So the 3 R's are associated with leptospirosis, which you have to remember. 3 R's are, one is rodents, transmitted by urine of rodents. Second is rainfall, because following rainfall, all the farms in the fields are flooded with water, and when the infected rodents pass their urine, these water gets contaminated with the infected urine of the animals. And third R stands for rice field. So this is very common in persons working in rice field, common during rainy season, and predominantly transmitted by rodents. So always remember 3 R with leptospirosis: rodents, rainfall, and rice field. And when the person comes in contact with this infected water, the leptospira enters through the cuts or abrasions in the skin and mucous membrane and enters inside the human body and causes human infection. And once the organism enters inside the bloodstream, the incubation period is on an average of 10 days, and it can result either as a mild clinical manifestation or a more severe form of disease. So the milder form is an anticteric febrile illness, and the more severe form is called the Weil's disease. So the mild form of disease usually presents as a flu-like illness where the patient develops fever, chills, headache, conjunctivitis, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain with myalgia. And the more severe form of disease is called as Weil's disease, which is also called as hepatorenal hemorrhagic syndrome, where the organism present in the bloodstream results in affection of liver and the kidney, leading to complication and resulting in the more severe form, which is called as Weil's disease. So the clinical manifestations are patient develops fever, conjunctivitis, and later progresses to albuminuria, jaundice, and hemorrhage because of involvement of liver and kidneys. It is a rapidly progressive manifestation with a case fatality rate of around 5 to 15%. So specimens which can be collected for making a lab diagnosis of leptospirosis are blood, CSF, and urine. And serum is also collected for performing a serological diagnosis. So once the samples has been collected, unlike other organisms, cultivating leptospira is very difficult, and therefore direct microscopic examination plays a major role in diagnosis of leptospira infection. And for that, you need to have a dark field microscopy because these are very thin, delicate organisms. They cannot be visualized under the normal microscope. So these organisms can be visualized under the dark field microscopy, where they are seen as a slender, flexible, highly coiled organism with the hooked ends, which gives a clue that these are Leptospira intrigans. Or you can go for a silver impregnation technique to increase the thickness of the organism and then view under the microscope. Or fluorescent antibody technique can also be done, where you have to have the presence of fluorescent microscope to view the fluorescent bacteria. So the major disadvantage of this direct microscopic demonstration is these are less sensitive and they require technical expertise. And therefore, serological tests are performed in most of the places for demonstrating Leptospira infection. And culture isolation of these organisms are very laborious and technically demanding, and therefore this is not performed in most of the centers. In case culture is done, then the media which are commonly used are EMJH media, Stewart's medium, or Fletcher's medium. And the sample is inoculated. All these are liquid media. Sample is inoculated into these media, and Leptospira are obligate aerobes and they are very slow growing. And the culture has to be incubated at 30 degrees Celsius for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. So serological test plays a very important role in demonstrating Leptospira infection. So here again we can demonstrate IgM as well as IgG antibody. An IgM antibody usually develops by the end of first week and they slowly peak further, and in some cases they remain in the circulation for a period of up to 6 months. An IgG antibody appear later than IgM antibody, usually by the end of second week, and it can persist at very low level for many years in the patient body. And the serological test available for diagnosis of Leptospira infection are of two types. One is genus-specific serological test, other one is serotype-specific serological test. And genus-specific serological test, as the name indicates, it deducts antibodies by using the antigen from which is common for the genus Leptospira. So the antigen is acquired from the non-pathogenic organism Leptospira biflexa PETOC1 strain, and this deducts antibodies which is common for the antigen of the entire genus of Leptospira. There are many techniques by which this genus-specific antibody can be deducted. Like you have ELISA methods which deducts IgM and IgG antibody, immunochromatographic assay, indirect immunofluorescent assay. But the most specific tests are the serovar specific test, which is microscopic agglutination test or the MAT test. This is the gold standard method which is used for diagnosis of Leptospira because this uses live leptospiral serotypes for deducting the antibodies. So this can be done only in specialized laboratories where these live serovars of Leptospira are maintained, and whenever antibodies against the particular serotype is deducted, we know the serotype of Leptospira which is predominant in that community also. And therefore, microscopic agglutination test or the MAT test is the gold standard test for diagnosis of Leptospira. But this also needs technical expertise. It cannot be performed in all laboratory. You need to have specialized laboratories where the live Leptospira can be maintained. Why I am stressing this is because we saw in the culture technique, it's very difficult to grow Leptospira. It is very laborious and time consuming. So only laboratories which maintain the live serotypes or serovars of Leptospira can perform this microscopic agglutination. Alternatively, molecular tests like PCR is available for the rapid detection of Leptospira in the clinical samples. And coming to the treatment of leptospirosis. So again, doxycycline plays a very important role in treatment of leptospirosis. The treatment can be differentiated into mild and moderate disease. So in case of mild leptospirosis, you can treat with oral doxycycline 100 mg twice a day for 7 days. In case of severe leptospirosis, penicillin remains a drug of choice. Other alternative drugs which can be used are ceftriaxone and cefotaxime. And again, prophylaxis is very important to prevent the disease. So in general, improved personal hygienic measures, rodent control, health education, all these are important to prevent leptospirosis. And chemoprophylaxis with doxycycline can be tried in high-risk individuals. Thank you.